Harry's wife, a desperate defence. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. As you are aware, the Politico article came out and identified, as I have done for many years, that Harry's wife is a narcissist and set her amongst a group of other narcissists. Naturally, this is a threat to her control. It's challenge fuel to be labelled as such because being labelled as a narcissist is stigmatic. It isn't a compliment. And therefore, it offends her sense of superiority, her sense of goodness, her sense of empathy, at least her fake empathy, causing her to think, how can you call me a narcissist when I'm not one at all? Narcissists are self-obsessed, egotistical, controlling individuals. I'm none of those things. And remember, her narcissism does not allow her to see that she is a narcissist. In order, of course, to defend her, there are certain PR puff pieces that are pumped out. And interestingly, two have appeared, both authored by the same person, Julia Glassman, short articles in something called themarysue.com. I wonder that the irony of a publication called Mary Sue defending Harry's wife clearly is lost upon the author of the article. For those that you don't know, a Mary Sue is a character archetype in fiction. It's usually a young woman who's often portrayed as inexplicably competent across lots of different fields and domains, that she's gifted with unique talents or powers, godlike almost, liked or respected by most other characters, unrealistically free of weaknesses, extremely attractive, innately virtuous, and or generally lacking meaningful character flaws. Usually female in nature and almost always the main character, Mary Sue is often an author's idealised self-insertion and may serve as a form of wish fulfillment. Mary Sue's stories are often written by adolescent authors as a consequence of their immaturity of their writing and the fact that they often subconsciously insert themselves into the heart of the story to make themselves feel powerful. Now, of course, this is something that very much a narcissist would do, make themselves the main person in the story, even though they might not realise that's what they're actually doing. It would, of course, enable them, by being powerful, beautiful, attractive, amazing, to deal with various threats to control. And therefore, I do find it entertaining that an article, or a website rather, called themarysue.com is there defending Harry's wife, because after all, if anybody is a Mary Sue, it's Harry's wife. We've seen it with the Archetype series, which was just basically her own checklist of trying to get even in relation to various people who called her various things throughout history. And it was a badly disguised attempt at talking about these issues when everybody could see it was just a hit list. But what of this Mary Sue and its response to both the Politico article and generally defending Harry's wife? Well, let's dive into the two articles because it's quite insightful. The first of which, as I mentioned, it's written by somebody called Julia Glassman. And let's find out a little bit about her. Her profile tells us that Julia Glassman, her, lives in Los Angeles, where she reads tarot and watches Marvel movies. Okay, well, nothing wrong with doing those things, but it's not really a journalistic roll call of excellence compared to other people that I comment upon. But let's just park that there for the moment, because her credentials are of some importance. The first article that was written on December the 19th is headlined, Harry and Harry's Wife Shows How a Tiny Group of Racists Can Warp the Minds of Millions. The second half of Harry and Harry's Wife, the Netflix documentary about Prince Harry and Harry's wife, is now streaming, and it delves even deeper into the racist harassment that prompted the couple to leave the United Kingdom and step back from their royal duties. A point of correction, what actually caused them to leave is the fact that she couldn't get her way. She wasn't able to assert control in the way that she wanted, and therefore her narcissism told her that she was being harassed and that it was racist to give her an excuse to withdraw and thus assert control by withdrawal. I, as an expert in narcissism, am able to explain that the racism was simply a cover-up for the much greater need for control and fuel. Of course, I don't expect that the author of this article would necessarily understand that. She continues to write, what's more, episode 5 shows that the kind of mass hysteria that Harry's wife faced, which include death threats and members of the paparazzi breaking into the property where she was staying, doesn't come about on its own. It has to be deliberately crafted and then relentlessly pushed into the public consciousness in order to take hold. The documentary includes interviews with 2 information experts, Dr. Sophia Noble, author of Algorithms of Oppression, see Parts Passim with analysis of her, and Christopher Boozy, CEO of analytics company Bot Sentinel, and individual who is finding himself on the receiving end of various pieces of litigation. Individual who, of course, has been called out by his daughter for abusive behaviours and doesn't want anything to do with him. Individual who chooses bankruptcy rather than paying his rent and is engaged in throwing brickbats at the royal family whilst then proclaiming to be a saviour of other people in terms of his somewhat flawed algorithm. The article continues, in 2021, Bot Sentinel analysed 114,000 racist tweets targeting Harry's wife and found that 70% of that content came from just 83 accounts. You recall, of course, in Parts Passim, that the determination of hate and racism was never properly detailed, that the provenance of this report was never established, that the authors of the report, in terms of who commissioned it, were neither established, and there were many flaws with regard to its efficacy and its veracity. And indeed, Twitter itself turned around and explained that there was not a coordinated attack, although that's what Christopher Boozy claimed that there was. The Mary Sue article continues, those accounts, which Noble describes as highly coordinated and deeply networked, which of course Twitter's own evidence demonstrated they were not, had a combined reach of 17 million people. Boozy explains that the owners of the accounts worked together to plan which photos they would share and which talking points they would focus on. They also used various tricks and hacks to create multiple accounts, artificially inflating their numbers. It was a deliberate hate campaign launched by just a few individuals, and it worked. Notice also that there is no mention of all of the Sussex squad and their behaviour towards people. It's all one way, according to the Mary Sue. The same dynamic is at play in the British tabloids. The British public didn't automatically hate Harry's wife with the kind of fervour that forced her and Harry to leave the country. Once again, that was the perception of a hatred. Most people indeed welcomed her with open arms, and it was her behaviour, repeat, her behaviour, something that journalists, inverted commas, such as this one, really struggle to understand, that caused people to turn against her. She writes, the British public didn't automatically hate Harry's wife with the kind of fervour that forced her and Harry to leave the country, as we see in the initial positive coverage after their wedding, and her overwhelming support among Brits of colour. Don't forget also that she was supported by people who were white, until such time as she demonstrated her true colours. It took tabloid after tabloid attacking her for everything from the hat she wore to the avocado she ate to turn the tide against her. Or, more likely, many people could see and judge for themselves her own behaviour. It wasn't the tabloids that turned the tide. That isn't to say that the tabloids and Twitter trolls weren't working in fertile ground, though. There's plenty of racism among white people all over the world, but bigotry is like an ember. It can be stamped out or stoked into a ravenous bonfire, especially when it turns a profit. Bot Sentinel's analysis shows what looks like public consensus is often anything but. Well, hang on a second, I thought it was all coordinated. Personally, that fills me with both fear and hope. Fear of what small groups of toxic people are capable of, and hope that once their veneer of power is stripped away, the rest of us can take that power back. Indeed, perhaps you ought to fear what small groups of people such as Christopher Boozy and the Sussex Squad engage in with their hateful content. After all, is it often the case with this situation that we see repeatedly the criticism of those that call out Harry's wife's behaviour, but then there is silence with regard to those that have attacked the royal family. So Julia Glassman's article there demonstrating where she has nailed her colours to the mast, but she's popped up again just 8 days later to comment upon Politico's article. Politico's article on Narcissus is a thinly veiled hit job on Harry's wife. No, it's quite simply describing what she is. It's not a hit job. It's an observation and a description in the same way that this channel observes various famous and infamous narcissists. Glassman writes, on Monday, Politico published an op-ed by Joanna Weiss called 2022 as the year we all finally got tired of narcissists. From the title, you'd think the piece would be a cathartic read. We were subjected to some titanic narcissists this year, weren't we? Donald Trump hawked trading cards depicting him as a superhero. Elon Musk carried a kitchen sink through the front door of Twitter before firing half its staff. Ye declared that he liked Hitler. Except the article isn't about any of that stuff. Well, actually it is, because it labels them all as narcissists. Sure, it devotes a few paragraphs to malignant narcissists like Trump, Musk and Ye, but the main focus of the article, taking up about half of its total word count, is Vice's hatred of the Netflix documentary Harry and Harry's Wife. Well, again, just because somebody expresses a dislike for Harry's wife doesn't equate to hatred, but we see this once again with her supporters, that the minute that you criticise Harry's wife, you are a hater. It's lazy and it's inaccurate. The article continues. It struck me, Vice writes, that the overreach that led to the Sussex's critically panned mega-series is the same impulse that turned Elon Musk into a terror on Twitter, that prompted Ye to up the ante of outrageous behaviour until he crossed the line into blatant anti-Semitism, that sent Bankman-Fried from the top of the world to Bahamian jail. Well, indeed it is. It's narcissism at work in all instances. But the author of this article states, but it's not, though. It's not the same impulse at all. Harry and Harry's wife had to leave not one but two homes after being hounded by racist attacks and death threats. Well, I'm pretty sure that Elon Musk gets death threats, but he doesn't cry about it. I'm sure Kanye West gets them as well, but he doesn't cry about them. I'm sure people who've been defrauded by Bankman-Fried and Holmes have had pretty clear things to say about them, which would undoubtedly include threats. But they haven't cried about them like big babies, like Harry's wife does, because they're different types of narcissists to that of Harry's wife, who is stuck in a perpetual cycle of victimhood, given the status of narcissist that she is. Again, of course, Glassman doesn't realise this, because she's not an expert in narcissism. She continues to write, the British royal family fed Harry's wife to the tabloids in order to draw media attention away from other family members. You can critique Harry and Harry's wife as a production, but its purpose, along with the Oprah interview, was to set the record straight and allow Harry's wife to tell her side of the story. Well, understand this, Julia Glassman. That is the narcissist perspective that you're hearing. Anyone with a modicum of common sense can plainly see that. Vice spoke to a political scientist who gave her a definition of grandiose narcissists. They believe they're absolute best at what they do, Vice writes. They go to great lengths to protect and defend their egos. They strive to be unique and promote themselves energetically. Vice then claims that's the story in a nutshell of Harry and Harry's wife. Again, what Vice states is accurate. You only have to look at parts passim, which demonstrates how they have behaved in that manner. Her and him as the captive of her. Glassman writes, it's not the story of Trump with those astonishingly infantile NFTs, ? Not Musk, who just yesterday compared himself to Batman. It's Harry and Harry's wife who were grandiose narcissists for pushing back against racists. No, that is incorrect. Nobody is calling her a narcissist for pushing back against racists. She's called a narcissist because of all of the behaviours which demonstrate that she exhibits a sense of entitlement. All of the behaviours that I have identified again and again and again, which demonstrate that she operates with a lack of accountability, that she shows grandiosity, magical thinking, haughty behaviours, manipulative behaviours, poor boundary recognition, numerous aspects of the narcissistic dynamic and an absence of emotional empathy. Those are the things that make her a narcissist, not pushing back against racists. Perhaps, Miss Glassman, if you actually spent some time viewing the evidence in an objective fashion, rather than just being a mouthpiece for defending Harry and Harry's wife, you would see that. She continues, and if you still have any seed of doubt about that this is about race, consider the image that accompanied the article. Even though Vice claims that she's equally disgusted with Harry's wife and Harry, it's Harry's wife's photo that's planted right in the centre of Vice's lineup of narcissists. It's almost as unhinged as Jeremy Clarkson's desire to see Harry's wife paraded through the streets naked. So just because she's put in the middle of the picture, that means that that's unhinged. Something of a reach, I would suggest. Glassman continues, racists are frothing at the mouth of the idea of a black princess. No. And it shows. No. If you want to see some real narcissism, look no further than white people like Joanna Weiss. And once again, you see, this is the kind of behaviour that individuals such as Glassman engage in repeatedly. You are not allowed to criticise Harry's wife, but I'm allowed to criticise you. I'm allowed to call you a racist and a narcissist. Well, actually, Joanna Weiss hasn't shown any evidence of being a narcissist. And in fact, she has greater journalistic credentials than Glassman. But Glassman comes out with a short hit piece against Weissman. This is typical of these individuals that adopt the #BeKind mantra. And interestingly, immediately underneath this, if you want to see some real narcissism look no further than white people like Joanna Weiss, which is an ad hominem attack and a slur, the Mary Sue states, the Mary Sue has a strict comment policy that forbids, but is not limited to, personal insults towards anyone, hate speech and trolling. It would suggest to me that Miss Glassman has just engaged in being a hypocrite. That doesn't mean that she's a narcissist. I don't have enough information to make that determination, but it does tell me that she engages in the very behaviour that she criticises other people for, and thus the credibility of what she writes has to be reduced as a consequence. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.